because I wrote selfishly for myself. They also wrote for parents, and I wrote for young people. I wanted 15 or 16-year-olds who were struggling with things. I've given this to at least 50 students who I think needed it. I wrote a curriculum that's taught in schools also, but mine, what I liked about it was it's a rare book in that parents and their children were reading the same book. That's very rare.
Oh, yeah. Marc, that's so great to meet you.
Same here. Thanks so much, Petra.
And I've been reading about you and looking at all the great work you're doing, and you used to be a teacher.
Yes, in my other life for 33 years.
Amazing.
I taught middle school for 8 years and then high school for 25.
And also, amazing, you're a writer and you've got so many books already that you've written. And was this also from teaching? You know, did you get your stories? Is that from teaching, or the experiences that you had during your time as a teacher?
Yeah, great question. Initially, no. I was born in Yonkers, New York, and lived there for 16 years. It was pretty popular, had a lot of friends, and my parents came in. Dad is semi-retiring, so we're moving to Florida. And I was 16, had all my friendships, was in the high school band, played the clarinet, not really a chick magnet, but it was a good instrument. And I didn't want to go. I was very depressed. I went, I'd say 3 or 4 months in. I woke up at 5 in the morning to take my cousin to visit her brother, my other cousin at college. I said, we're going to leave early. It's a 4-hour drive. I want to get there at 9 a.m. And I passed. His name was Mark and my name is Mark. So we called him Mark Jed and me Mark David. So my cousin Candace was sitting next to me and she said, Mark David, you missed the exit. Barely heard her. Went around again. She claimed she said it again. I'm only telling you what she said. I was technically unconscious because, I was having a petit mal seizure. And I had a grand mal seizure in my 1977 Ford Mustang. And when I had the seizure, instead of stomping, I stomped on the gas, went really, really fast, and we were heading up to a toll booth. And she had to steer us through the toll booth. And they called an ambulance. First they said, is your cousin on drugs? And she said, no, he would never be. I said, I'm fine, got out of the car, fainted into the arms of a police officer, went in an ambulance. 2 hours later, came home with a bottle of Dilantin and a diagnosis of epilepsy. And that was very tough because I was already not so happy. You know, I was a big fish in a small pond, and that changed. I had some cousins in Florida, but that was it. Didn't like the school system there. And was probably clinically depressed for 2 years. Back then, we didn't go to therapists, and the family didn't tell anybody else, really. And I saw it as a tremendous weakness and an embarrassment. And then the years went on, and lo and behold, when I'm 54, I decided to write the book because my son had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And he was starting to get depressed and very upset. And I was very methodical in helping. My wife said, how are you so methodical about this and not emotional? And I said, it's just who I am, but I guess it's because what I had to overcome and deal with as a teen. So then I started to realize as a teacher, the teacher light bulb went off, that if I can help my own son and my wife and people through this, maybe I can help others. So I did write the book. It started in a different name. The book was called Search and Seizure, which I thought was brilliant. And then some publisher said to me, it's a picture of a Mustang and it says search and seizure. We think it's about a drug bust, that they were searching and seizing your car.
Okay.
But when that book came out, it was an Amazon bestseller. But I was trying to get more eyeballs on it, so I worked with some people who said, change the title. So we changed it to Adversity Defeated, Turn Your Struggles into Strengths. And it's not a book about epilepsy, it's a book about overcoming adversity. My adversity just happened to be epilepsy. Here's a shameless plug. There's the book.
Oh, wow, yeah.
That's my brain, but my brain's a lot busier than that brain. But not always a good thing. So,
but you talk about that, previously we didn't, as you didn't think a child could have depression. I think if I think of my youth, I also think we didn't think we could have depression. You would always just associate it with with people who are older who have other stresses. But
Hmm.
thinking back, I think even in my time, we had depression, and we had situations where we had to overcome, and we didn't have this almost acknowledgement of, hey, you're a teenager, there's a possibility that you can have depression.
Oh, absolutely. And now, education has a lot of buzzwords, health and wellness, uh, the learning target, the objectives. Things change for teachers all the time. But this mental health, which is the worst time that I've seen working with young people in the history of my life as a person and an educator. But now, this is nothing new. Uh, you know, uh, Bullying is nothing new. Uh, Suicide among young people is nothing new, but the numbers are tenfold and beyond. And I'll tell you, I had an aunt call me up and said, "Mark, I read your book. Wow, you're such a great fiction author. Who knew you could write?" I said, "What do you mean fiction?" It's true. I had epilepsy. She said, "What are you talking about? This is my father's sister." She said, "You had epilepsy? That's not possible. Your father never told me that." Well, my parents didn't tell anybody that because they thought people would see it as a weakness. I believed people would see it as a weakness. And so your question, the answer is half yes, half no. I didn't write just because I was an educator. I wrote because of the things I went through as a younger person. But then because of being an educator, I'll tell you that years ago, there were no HIPAA laws. So when I started teaching, we got big containers of your homeroom, and you'd look it up, and you'd find every sickness of the kid, if the mother was abused, everything about their health. And I would say 6 or 8, when I taught in the Bronx, 6 or 8 kids in my class had epilepsy. Now, I was on Dilan at the time, and I had bleeding gums and the side effects, and I saw the kids crying and being upset by their side effects. But I was in my 20s, and I was too stupid, quite honestly, and too inexperienced to say to them, "Come here, I know what you're going through. I have it too." Now I talk about it at schools, overcoming adversity. I use it in my tutoring business and, of course, on the show. But to be that embarrassed and not until I'm 54, let people know, look, better late than never. But I think I helped a lot of people through my career, but I could have helped a lot more because that gives me the sixth sense in the tutoring business. It gives me a sixth sense in being a certified life coach because I know the suffering and the secrecy. And I was a really happy, funny kid. And, my mother had a stroke when she was 39 and had a total recovery, a major stroke in the hospital for a full month. And she said to me, "Look, you're good looking, you're funny, you have a good sense of humor. And let me tell you what else. You have epilepsy. You're going to deal with this. It's going to keep you grounded." Now, I listened to her, but not the first 2 years. Very depressed. And then I decided to make it my friend, not my enemy. I had to embrace it. So I went, and back then it wasn't easy. I had to learn about epilepsy. It took me about 2 months to learn what you could learn now in 20 minutes on the internet. I had to go in the library into the periodical section and look up microfiche and flip it and see all these things. I had to write to the different hospitals at the Epilepsy Foundation. You have to learn about these things to deal with your struggles. And I have to tell you, it was very difficult. And the writing alone was a catharsis. Because when I finished writing it, I said to my wife, "If I don't show this to anybody, this is the best thing I've ever done." And then one day she came down and I was about to hit the send button or the publish button post on Facebook. She said, "What are you doing? You're staring at the screen." And I said, "Nobody knows about this. In 10 seconds, 1,000 people are going to know about this." And once I saw that, then I started to connect with other people and start co-author their memoirs and different writing, as you know, about a handbook for teachers and things like that. But I love it. It's very therapeutic, whether you're a good writer or not. Just writing these things down. You know how many emails I've written to people that I'm angry with, and I feel better later. I never hit the send button because I always wait 24 hours before I say, "Look, this relationship's about to end. Am I sending this or not?"
Well, I sent a few in my lifetime, which I really regret. So
Yeah.
and then somebody said to me, "I write the email and then just go and drink a glass of wine and then come back and see if you still want to send it."
Yeah.
But true what you're saying, and also uh, I'm also thinking a lot about sometimes how we grew up, and there was no sort of sugarcoating things, and there was no cotton wool to wrap us in. We dealt with things which wasn't, it was these things that's normal, that shape you for the future, that shape you for adulthood, and you deal with it.
Yeah, it's there's great things about the way kids are brought up today. There's not so great things. I mean, I remember I would say to my parents, I have nothing to do today. And the great, brilliant answer was bang your head against the wall. Now, they weren't telling me to bang my head against the wall. They were like, go outside, do something, think of something. So I think kids are coddled a bit too much these days. I think social media has all but destroyed a large percentage of young people and are dealing with things they shouldn't have to deal with. I think some educators are ill-equipped, as they should be. When I went in, I taught English. Nobody said to me, and I was a psychologist, a therapist, and loco parenti, the parent, the friend, the teacher, all in one. That's what I loved about teaching, but it was very, very demanding. And it was an amazing, rewarding career. But sometimes, you can get depressed. I've had over 2,000 students. So I've had students who were abused by their family. I've had students, who were displaced from other countries. I had students who left Haiti after the earthquake and came to school. And I'm them Shakespeare, and they 2 weeks before were pulling family members out of rubble. So it was a very intense career, which I loved. But it led to many things. The book led to my show because the show only started after I did 60 or 70 interviews on the book, and how I went into schools and did various workshops, and then it started. I called it Lighting the Educational Flame, and then some other streaming services picked it up and said you should change the name, so it's Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. And what I say about the show is it's not Hollywoodish. Not that Hollywoodish shows aren't great. I watch them. Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, all those shows. But mine is more about the story behind the glory. How did you get to where you got to, and what obstacles did you overcome? Because too often, especially young people, but the parents too, they only see the glitz and the glamour. They don't know that there are artists who are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that were on my show, The Zombies, whose promoters were making millions off of them, and they didn't know where the next meal was coming from. So I really like to delve into those things and use that sixth sense, because I think that's what people love reality TV, but look, they like the housewives shows and some of these other shows and Project Runway and stuff, but there needs to be a place. There's, I think, a shortage of things really telling the story and how to overcome obstacles and how to persevere. And I think that's very, very important.
Well, this is also what I found with talking to artists is and like you yourself, as a writer also, and as a teacher, which is also a form of art. Teaching is really something very special that some people can't, and some people have that ability.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you that we never see the path. We see on Instagram and Facebook, we see almost just the bit, where there's an applause or the person is on the stage. But if you take many of these artists, they start playing the piano. If I take of musicians, they start their instruments when they're 4 years old or 5 years old. So it's all those years that shape them as artists, as people, not just as artists, but as people as well, for what they have to overcome. And it's great stories, these life stories, I think, is so important today for people to understand that nobody just arrives there.
No, and you see, look at people like Tina Turner and even Whitney Houston. Look at all these problems and issues in the background, so to speak. And also, a lot of times they don't have these problems until they become famous. Some people don't know how to handle money and fame. Look, you go out to dinner and 90 people come up and say, "I love your show, I love your show, I love your show." It's got to get to your head at some point. But look at how many child actors that have had issues. And some of them have committed suicide and whatnot. So there's just such a story behind all these things. And success is wonderful, but it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work. And I've had a lot of celebrities and artists, that you mentioned also. But I've had business people. I mean, we're all people at the end of the day. And that's why I really want to hear their life story. And as an educator, I just have, I think, a little different spin because I don't know the Hollywood-ish side. I know asking questions and eliciting responses.
But as a teacher, you must also have, I mean, for such a long time, and you say you worked with different children, and you remember also all these incidents, and so that must, it must be something that you carry with you as well. So it's part of you, all these experiences and the stories and the experiences also of the children.
Absolutely. I've had students. The biggest regret, and I can't go back in time, but I was a very young teacher, and overheard a girl in the beginning of the period in homeroom talking to a friend every couple. Can I come to your house today? Can I come to your house today? She says, "Why do you keep asking to come to my house?" She said, "Well, my grandfather has poker games." She was 15. "My grandfather has poker games on Tuesdays, and I serve them and help them, but the men touch me inappropriately." And I heard that, and I did go to a guidance counselor, mentioned it. I did not follow through. The girl, 6 months later, was in school. She was pregnant, and it was the father was a man in his 60s who was the grandfather's poker buddy, and I think that was on me. And the way that I deal with that is I don't do a school program or a camp program when I teach and present in front of trained camp staff without telling that story. See something, you have to say something, but also follow up. And I was in my 20s. What did I know then? But the truth was, I was a grown man. I had a full-time job. The training wasn't so good there. So I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what the rules in the law was. But I've had these. I've had success stories too. But when you see kids suffering, you have to think for yourself. I really have to. I really should get this lesson in. But who am I presenting to, and where? I have to meet them at their reality. And so many different children. Most of my career in teaching was spent with students. 77% of my students were on free and reduced lunch. They were minorities. But my tutoring business, Great Success Education, a lot of times with people who could afford tutoring, and it was just 4 miles down the road, and they had more money. So I was seriously 4 miles away from people who had poverty, and then the other 4 miles, totally different issues. If there was drug use where I taught, it was mostly marijuana and alcohol. But on the other end, it was opioids and sometimes cocaine, things of that nature, Adderall, people taking each other's medication. So it was, I'm not trying to paint doom and gloom. There were some fabulously successful, wonderful people there, great friends, mature people. Students I tutor now who are 16 or 17 are years further than I was in my 20s. But there's a lot of pressure out there. There's a lot of situations that people should not find themselves in. And when they do, they don't know how to deal with it. And to be honest, I think they learn from some of the questions I ask, because you hear some stories that you can't believe from some of these people who are celebrities, both well-known and not so well-known. And just the depth of humanity when you talk to people, and I'm sure you know this, it's never the same interview. Even if it's the same question, when I say, what's the story behind the glory? I get different answers from 180 people.
Yeah, that's true. But you're talking about also the classroom and the different children. But do you think in education there's too much pressure on the sort of the prestige of it, or the marks? The children have to get specific marks in science and maths, and how many schools can get the best results for the academics, but then that there's less time for art and there's less time for children to get to express themselves.
So now you're singing my song, because you're talking about academic education, and there's too much of a lack of character education. So when I go into schools, I do academic education. I do with study skills for health and wellness and to reduce stress. It used to just be called study skills. Schools wanted me more, and it was study skills for health and wellness and to reduce stress, because the kids are getting so stressed. There isn't enough time for character education. There's too much emphasis, in my opinion, on grades, because I've taught kids who are brilliant, brilliant, couldn't hold down a job. If they were in a cubicle, no problem. The second they were put on a team, didn't know how to work with others, didn't know how to treat others, didn't know how to communicate effectively. And there's not enough anti-bullying, team building, communication skills, listening skills. There's too much of that missing. There's not enough. I know schools, thank God, bring in speakers sometimes to talk about drug use and things of that nature. So I have the academic end when I go in and do the study skills for health and wellness and things of that nature. But I love even more the character education when they bring me in to overcome adversity and peer pressure. You go to a party and you don't want to do drugs, and the girl or boy that you think is so good looking that you like is there, and they're experimenting with 6 other people, and they say to you, and your parents aren't with you at this party, oh, just try it, maybe you'll like it. What do? Do you see the forest for the trees? You know that every drug addict started, not every, many started that way, that marijuana is a gateway drug to some other harder drugs. And when somebody says, hey, try my brother's Adderall, it helps him concentrate, you'll concentrate also. How do you learn how to say no? How do you learn how to do that and still keep, either your popularity? And quite honestly, what I say, if you have a friend that's mad at you for not doing that, that's not a friend. So learn what friends are and learn what a support system is. I did not have or make myself a good support system when I was diagnosed with epilepsy. I put it all on myself. Never had a therapist. Didn't ask for one. Probably wouldn't have wanted one. And didn't tell anybody. So how could people who loved me help me if they didn't know? So yeah, I'm all for academic education. I taught for over 30 years. And but that character education, it has to be there. It has to be in, not just in speakers coming in, but in your lessons. It's already in the literature you're teaching the kids. Apply it to their lives. And this is true in college too. I say kids, but at my age, everybody's a kid. But
No.
when everybody can learn, but the emphasis, and the parents buy into it too much. I do a lot of SAT and ACT prep, and yes, it's important. But I can't tell you, in the last 7 to 10 years, I've had a large number of students who got into a college but didn't graduate from the college they first got into because they had the grades and the GPA and whatever, and the test scores to get in, but they didn't have the discipline to stay in. Because I remember when I first went to college, my first night, it was 1 a.m. I said to my friends, this is great. What time am I supposed to go to sleep? I said, nobody's going to, and I had FOMO. I had fear of missing out like nobody's business. Still as an adult, I have it. When people aren't there, when you have those helicopter parents that said, don't forget you have a science test tomorrow, who's reminding you about your science test? And when you're in a lecture center with 300 students, the professor isn't saying, Mark, did you do your homework last night? It's a totally different thing. So I think that some people are ill-equipped, and it doesn't cost millions of dollars to equip them.
Exactly, yeah. I always believe that if the one thing that a child should understand is consequence, that they have to accept responsibility. And if you can do that in life, then it's much easier to go through life, because you have to just accept the responsibility for what you do.
Well, it's twofold. It's responsibility, but there's no responsibility anymore because there's no accountability.
Exactly, yeah.
And I saw in a magazine once, years ago, it said teaching in 1970 and teaching in 2000. And in 1970, they're at a back-to-school night, meet the teacher night, and they have the report card, and the kid failed. And the parents looked at the kid in the cartoon and said, what's the meaning of this? Then they show you the 2001, and they're looking at the teacher, and they're saying to the teacher, what's the meaning of this?
Yeah.
I lived through that because I started teaching in the 80s. So it's a total turnaround. There's no accountability for bad behavior. Some people have their job. Like, look, I was a dean of discipline, and I learned a lot with that too. When you're on the dean's list in college, it's a good thing. When you're on the dean's list in the high school, it's not a good thing. So it means there was some behavior issues. And the things I saw, and when I brought parents in, we need more programs for parents too. Not parents who are just single parents or didn't have a higher education. There are people out there who are lawyers and doctors. I've had people who, I call them in and they've done some terrible things. Their father's a cop, their mom's a lawyer, things like that. So kids are kids. And yes, my show is really for, I think my biggest demographic is 35 to 54 and things of that nature. But it's really showing them how people were held accountable and the problems they had and what they did when they weren't held accountable. So it's wonderful times now, but it's very difficult times as well. And I just think that I'm looking forward to the day where we have to have a bake sale for equipment for the Army and the Navy and the military because there's peace, and that we have all the money we need for education.
Mm, true. But tell me, Mark, the writing, when you write, what inspires you? What inspires the book? Because you tell the story, you tell your story, but do you go or do you think of things that need to be said, that it's for you something that you want to write about?
Right. So depends what I'm writing. I'll walk you through just a couple of things. So when I wrote Adversity Defeated, Turn Your Struggles into Strengths, I had a bullet list of things that I wanted to include. So one bullet list was the message I wanted to send, and the other side was the stories and things that happened in my life that speak to that
Oh,
message.
I see. Yeah.
Because I wrote selfishly for myself. They also wrote for parents, and I wrote for young people. I wanted 15 or 16-year-olds who were struggling with things. I've given this to at least 50 students who I think needed it. I wrote a curriculum that's taught in schools also. But mine, what I liked about it was it's a rare book in that parents and their children were reading the same book. That's very rare.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
kids won't read a book unless you hang them over a cliff and say, read this book. So now that they can discuss the same thing, that's helpful. So I do that. Each chapter had its own kind of message and story behind it that was all connected. And it was all about overcoming adversity. It really wasn't about epilepsy. As I said before, my adversity was epilepsy. When I wrote Highly Effective Teaching Strategies, that was for teachers. But I wanted to write about different things, because what is teaching? It's not just the curriculum you're teaching. It's classroom management. It's lesson planning. It's knowing the different learning modalities. When I was a student 800 years ago, back in the cave, there was one way to learn, the way that teacher taught. Then when you went to the next period, so you have to know that there are people in front of you who are auditory learners. There are people who are visual learners, kinesthetic learners. Are you doing PBL, project-based learning? And it's not easy. You don't have to do it all in one lesson. You have 182 school days. But you have to put a smattering of these things in. And a lot of people who knew much more about the English than I did, much more about literature. I went to college when I got my master's degree with people who were unbelievable. Some of them I thought went to school with Shakespeare. I mean, they knew poetry and writing and literature better than I ever could. But many of them had to leave teaching. They couldn't impart the information to students because they couldn't manage the classroom. And people don't realize that that's a big part of it as well. And so when I wrote that book, I put good lesson planning in it, and I put classroom management. And when I started to present that at schools, a lot of the teachers really liked that, because I didn't have to deal initially in my first 15 years with kids on their cell phones while I was teaching. I didn't have to deal with that. I didn't deal with somebody coming in very upset because she was bullied on social media, or a picture of her that was inappropriate is now in the hands of 600 students within 10 seconds on Snapchat. So these are different struggles, but there are certain things you can control, and I really want to say manage in the classroom. So that kind of writing was about that. I've also co-authored some books. Some I was more editing than co-authoring.
I saw, yeah.
Yeah, but a resiliency playbook with Dr. Cass Henry. I co-authored a book with a former student, a tutoring student who was an opioid addict. Pretty much started when I was tutoring him, and very rough teen years, horrible young adulthood, overcame it. Now I think he's the top 3 speakers in the country when it comes to that, and he overcame that. So I was able to co-author that book, which he did not want to write. I said, just read my book. And he said, I like your book, but I don't want to write a book. I said, okay. I called a month later, write a book. Let me help you with it. So he finally said yes. So that was a different thing, telling other people's story. For Gloria Key, very African-American woman, got her degree in her 40s or 50s, was in abusive relationships. She was the mother of 2 of my students. So I co-authored her book, A Key That Turned. So I really liked...
I saw that, but is it just the story that you hear from the person that you think this has to be in a book, or this can inspire somebody else? Or what makes you then co-write the book?
Right. So sometimes I can smell a story. Obviously, with the person who, the opioid addict who's now a lawyer, the former opioid addict, I know there's a story there as an educator, but when she approached me, she said, "I saw you wrote a book, and then I saw something somewhere posted that you help people." I don't say yes to everyone, and I said to her, "Tell me your story." And I said, You have to get very personal." I said, "What I tell them is, I want you to take notes, vomit on the paper. I want too much information. It's my job to see, can I pull stuff?" And when she started to tell me things, then I said, "Okay, that's something we can use, but is that something you want to write about?" Because there's things in there. For example, in my book, I would say for 3 months, my parents were on public assistance. My father made a lot of money in the furniture business, and then had a very bad turn when he retired too early. And we were on public assistance for 3 months. I wanted to put that in the book, and my sister asked me not to. And I respected that because she said, it's embarrassing. Our friends are going to read it. Well, I should have left it in. And but it's in my talks. So have to make sure that people are, hey, this is a great story. Yeah, but I don't want to talk about that. Well, then, you should rethink this. So a story, it has to be them overcome. They don't have to be a millionaire. But for me, someone who has an abusive relationship, who no longer is, somebody who didn't have the money or the confidence to go to college, goes in the 40s and gets a degree in the 50s, that's something that people need to see.
Yeah.
So I read a lot of self-help books, but what resonates with me more is when the person has walked the walk and talked the talk. So when I see that, that goes into my brain as, I think that's something special, and I think we can do something with that.
And that's amazing that you do that, because we think everything is just plain sailing for everybody, and it isn't, and to overcome that is such an inspiration when you read that.
It really is. It's inspired many people. Look, I've had students who said to me, "Mr. Hoberman, you inspired me. You changed my life forever," which is really nice. But I would have loved it to have been 500 more. So I've had 10, 15, 20 people say that. I had a student who was a former congressman in New York, first openly gay African-American congressman in Congress in history. Lovely person. Took him out to dinner one time, and he said, "Mr. Hoberman, I really am who I am because of you," which, by the way, is not true. I did have an influence on him, and he was brilliant, still brilliant. And it's wonderful to hear. But being able, I hope I changed. I don't need someone to call me and say, "I read your book, I did this and this, I'm so much better off." Lovely to hear that. But as long as I know that's happening, and I kind of have heard it through the grapevines from other people, I can tell as an educator if this should be able to help them. Will it help them? That's on their end. But that's my goal all the time, regardless of what I write.
But were you also fond of writing when you were a child?
Yeah, I excelled.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The average 9-year-old is better at math than I am now. So math was not my thing, and I found my groove in English. I found my groove in writing, and I was a very good reader. Loved reading stories, but wrote a lot. But mostly what I wrote was essays, that kind of writing. But then in creative writing, I started to branch out a little bit. I even took a creative writing course, I think, in college, and I had better writing prompts. But I held back some things. Remember, I could have written about epilepsy when I was 17. I wrote about it when I was 54. So a little slow on the uptake, but better late than never.
Yeah.
But I always loved, I'm also very vocal when I talk to people. I'm writing, but verbally. So to me, then I learned to take this and turn it into that. And of course, then typing after that. So yeah, that was always something that interested me. And I did a lot of creative writing stories too, but my joy is in nonfiction.
The real story.
Yes.
But do you get stuck sometimes, that you think that it doesn't come, the words don't come, or does it just, or are you just always writing?
So I don't get stuck sometimes. I get stuck all the time. And
okay.
you just gave the answer to the question. Do you just keep on writing? You just keep on writing. I've read things that I've written. I said, was I drunk when I wrote this? This is the most boring chapter, paragraph. What is this? And sometimes I read and I'm like, wow, that's a powerful sentence. I don't remember writing it. I remember living it, that kind of thing. Yeah. But you just keep, the only way to get better at anything is to keep doing it. So
Mhm.
you get better at writing, you keep writing, and everything's not going to be a winner. I had a Pulitzer Prize winning author, Jonathan Eig, on my show, who wrote a great biography about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he talked about he had to go and gather information. I'm all about the information, and that's what he was all about. Obviously, he goes and gets the information. Then you pick from that, and that's kind of what I do. But that's not the writer Marc Hoberman. That's the educator Marc Hoberman.
Oh, okay.
I mean, when I interview somebody, could I ask the same type of questions? Yes, but I ask deep questions. Like I remember I had Colin Blunstone of the Zombies on, and I said, "Tell me about Walpole Avenue." I hope I'm saying that right. And I talked. That was the street where he lived. Nobody's ever asked him that question before. But in doing my reading and things like that, I found out where he lived. And although we never met him, he was a block away from Paul McCartney. So those stories
Wow.
come out, and I've had people on the show who've said something after my fourth question that changes the whole interview
Mm.
out of nowhere. Back when I was younger and contemplated suicide. Wait, back up. What? I
Yeah.
mean, it's not out there.
Mm.
A lot of times we're on the shows and it's like, hey, when's the next movie coming out? How was it like? What was it like working with Helen Mirren? What did you feel like when you won the Emmy? Things like that. So getting the information is important in discussion. It's important in writing. And quite honestly, it's just gaining more knowledge. I find myself in the role of student more than teacher these days.
But you must have some, you know, something special to hear these things that people say. A lot of people talk and a lot of people tell their stories, but you must sense something from people too. You must have that ability to sense something from people where you think, do you know what? This is the story.
So thank you for saying that because that was developed. I didn't have that.
Oh,
And
okay.
and quite honestly, when I started to present at schools, I didn't want to be plug and play. So when there was a Q&A afterwards, then people shared their stories with me. So I'm not just a better listener now, I'm a different listener. When people say something, five people hear one thing, I hear something else. And so, I school myself. I read books on body language, communication, things like that. I'm always trying to learn, as I said. And that keeps me young. Maybe not in the age number, but really always learning new things. And, you love when people take an interest in you. I love you taking an interest in me today. So people want to know, back in the day when I said to people at a party, oh, what's your name? What do you do for a living? 2 minutes later, for $1 million, I couldn't tell you the name of what they did for a living. I was saying it on my way to get the chicken wings, at the party. That's
Yeah.
all. So now it's a very different conversation. If I look at old, I've probably done between Lighting the Educational Flame and Life Stories, close to 200 interviews. My first 7, I did most of the talking. A lot of interviews, when I look and you fast forward, you always can see the host a lot. I can't find myself a lot because I'm just asked a question. I'll do a follow-up question. But like you, I do tend to be verbose. But like you, what I'm saying is you give me time to talk. But I think that people need to ferret out important information to them. Some things will resonate and some will not.
Exactly. Yeah. But do you miss teaching?
Terribly. It's funny.
Really?
So I'm semi-retired, not retired. I retired earlier than I had to because I wanted to grow not just the education business and the speaking business, but really the show. I really wanted to grow the show. So I'm never happier. I love the show. I love tutoring. I tutor less and less now to do school programs, but there's nothing that excites me more than when I go and I do camp consulting and I go in and I have the 200 staff in front of me and I'm teaching communication skills and I'm doing interactive things. When I go in the classroom as a guest instructor, whatever, I just love that and I do miss it. But I say to people this way, I miss the clowns, but not the circus
Oh, yeah.
because it's administratively, there's a lot of challenges. It's much more political than I ever expected it to be. But when things slow down a little bit, I would like to teach something on the college level because I can't tell you how many times, because I had good classroom management, I had a good rapport with the kids, it was a little easier for me, but I have never had a full day where 100% of the people were listening and nobody was being disruptive. So in the college, they're really listening a little more. And I did a workshop once in college and said, ooh, I could get used to this. So And I do some power memorization seminars for seniors and adults and things like that. So yeah, there's nothing better for me than teaching. So I don't think my story is told yet or done in the classroom, so to speak. So yeah, I miss it. I'm going to get back to it in some way at some point.
But talking about that, what is the wish for you, or what is the dream?
I'd say the dream is to, whether I know it or not, to really have people grow, learn, and implement. Inspired, not. I'm so glad if this inspired. I've had people inspire me, but if you don't act on it, it was just an entertainment for an hour. So if people can, just like I did in the club, if I can improve people's lives, if I can make things easier for them, if I can help their relationships get better, if can help them learn better, faster, that would be, that is the goal. That's the ongoing goal. I've done that. I want to do it, but I want to do it in a much larger audience. So I'm not just being on a show, just more people. So that's really the dream. I'm Mr. Philanthropist. I'm not trying to say it, as an ego thing. I just really want to help people. If the best, I say this when I see it, counselor's not good. I say that counselor's a 6. He's not going to be a 10, but we can make him an 8. So if the best you can be in your life is a 4, that's a low number. But if the best you can be in your life is a 4, then don't be a 2.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my philosophy.
But you're quite driven as well.
Yeah, blessing and a curse.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, definitely, I am. Sometimes it comes off as overbearing, and yeah, I am driven. My father was a very hard worker. When his work didn't go so well, he took other jobs that a man of his age, normally wouldn't need to take. So I take a lot from that. Look, my grandfather wrote the music to Loretta Young and One Step Beyond in the 50s and 60s. He was a composer that has 30 of his songs are on SpongeBob SquarePants now, and this is 70 years after he wrote them. So I have that kind of gene pool to pull from. But you know what? Create your own genes. So the one thing I do love, and it's not a thing about wherever you are, you can be your better self. Just be your best self, whatever that looks like. And that's what being an educator taught me. And I would say that I learned more than they ever learned from me.
But you've got such a great energy. You are so positive, and you see things in such a positive way. And I think that's a very great quality that you have.
Thank you for saying that. But I will tell you now, people who've watched this entire episode, if I did not have epilepsy, that would not be true.
Really?
Yes. Don't let your struggles define you. You define you. That's my mantra when I present. And that has helped shape me. It also helped keep me depressed when I and my parents didn't handle it well. If a book existed like mine when I had it, my parents read it, they probably would have fared better with my diagnosis. Excuse me. But you really, I became who I am, not in spite of my illness, but because of it. So other people have it, and I'm in epilepsy groups on Facebook and stuff, and it's doom and gloom, and a lot of people aren't controlled. Thank God I am with medication. But there's other ways to look at these things, and that's what keeps me driven.
But that's great, and that's inspirational, and it's so uplifting talking to you. And I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to talk to you, Marc. What a great story! What a great person you are, and I hope still there are many books to come from your pen.
I hope so too. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure.
It's a great pleasure.